The Filipino sensation, a phenom in her own right, has become more than just an opponent. She is the ghost that stalks Ostapenko's competitive spirit. The recurring nightmare that plays out in broad daylight. A who has made Ostapenko's life excruciatingly difficult over the past season is back. And this time, the stakes feel even higher. The pressure almost unbearable because this is not just another second-round match on the tour calendar. A mere stepping stone in a long season. No, this is much, much more than that. This is a rematch laden with history, simmering with unresolved tension. This is unfinished business, a narrative arc begging for resolution. And for Ostapenko, this is presented as a chance, perhaps her last, to finally put these tormenting demons to rest, to exorcise the specter of AO from her mind. But the signs, based on everything we have witnessed from her recently, her erratic form, her increasingly volatile behavior on court, and the clear deterioration of her mental state, the signs are not good. In fact, they are profoundly unsettling. Not good at all. Let us start with Ostapenko herself, because before we even delve into the psychological warfare Alex Eala has inflicted upon her, we need to truly comprehend the kind of player we are talking about and, more importantly, the kind of dangerously unstable headspace she is currently operating in. Jelena Ostapenko burst onto the scene like a supernova, a former French Open champion whose victory stunned the tennis world. She wasn't just a big hitter. She was a force of nature. One of the most relentlessly aggressive baseliners on the WTA Tour. Her game is built on raw power, unadulterated aggression. On her absolute best day, when every ball finds its mark, and the adrenaline courses through her veins in perfect synchronicity, she is capable of utterly destroying absolutely anyone on any surface, flattening opponents with a relentless barrage of winners. Her ball striking is not just powerful. It is ferocious. A symphony of controlled violence. Her attitude is fierce, often intimidating, and she carries herself with a kind of almost arrogant confidence that can feel very unnerving, utterly disarming to an opponent who is not mentally prepared for the sheer onslaught. That, my friends, is Ostapenko at her peak. A terrifying prospect for anyone standing across the net. But here's the tragic paradox. Ostapenko at her worst is a completely different story. A devastatingly fragile shadow of her former self. And unfortunately for her and for anyone hoping to see that former champion emerge, the worst version of Ostapenko has been making far too many unwelcome appearances lately. Her career, despite its fleeting moments of brilliance, has been plagued by controversies, by outbursts, by moments of profound self-sabotage that have consistently raised serious questions about her fundamental ability to handle pressure, to channel frustration productively, and to navigate the treacherous moments when the tide of a match inexorably turns against her. One of the most glaring, most unforgettable examples of this came during a major tournament. A moment etched into the collective memory of tennis fans. Ostapenko, clearly boiling with a rage and frustration that seemed to consume her from within, turned not inward, not toward her game, but outward. She turned toward the innocent crowd inside the stadium, the very spectators who had paid to witness the beauty of tennis, and directed hostile, utterly inappropriate comments at them. It was a shocking, ugly scene. Rather than transforming that raw frustration into fuel for her game, rather than channeling it in a productive competitive direction, she pointed it squarely at the fans, at the external world, as if they were the source of her internal torment. It drew widespread condemnation, a collective gasp from the tennis community, and it painted a very clear, very damning picture of precisely what happens to Jeļena Ostapenko when the crucible of pressure becomes too hot. When the demons of frustration finally overwhelm her. And then, as if to underscore the point, there was the infamous Taylor-Townsend incident. A moment that spoke volumes, that told us everything we needed to know about the depth of her mental unraveling. After suffering a loss to Townsend in a match that had clearly burrowed under her skin, gnawing at her composure, Ostapenko didn't just shake hands and walk away. No, she went after Townsend at the net. She came in aggressively, seething with a palpable frustration, her eyes blazing, clearly looking for some kind of confrontation, some outlet for her unbridled rage. Even after the final point had already been played, even after the match had officially ended, Townsend, displaying an enormous, almost superhuman degree of class, maturity, and self-possession, simply shrugged her off, a dismissive gesture that spoke volumes, and calmly walked away. She absolutely refused to give Ostapenko the reaction. The dramatic confrontation she was so desperately, so pathetically looking for. And in doing so, in that quiet, dignified refusal, Townsend inadvertently exposed exactly how fragile Ostapenko becomes, how utterly unhinged she can appear when realities simply do not conform to her fierce, demanding expectations. This, make no mistake, is not the behavior of someone who is mentally composed, who is at peace with their craft. This is the raw, agonizing spectacle of someone who is cracking audibly under the immense weight of expectations, of frustration, and of a relentless internal battle. And this tragically is a pattern, a recurring motif that has followed Ostapenko throughout her turbulent career. a dark cloud that consistently threatens to eclipse her undoubted talent. Now, here is where this narrative truly pivots, where it gets really compellingly interesting. Because while Ostapenko has been displaying all these cracks, all these glaring vulnerabilities, almost as if she's inviting the world to witness her unraveling, Alex Eala has been doing the exact precise opposite. Eala has been quietly, steadily, methodically building a reputation, not just as a promising young talent, but as one of the most mentally composed, most unflappable young players on the entire WTA Tour. Her ascent has been marked not just by powerful ground strokes or elegant movement, but by an inner fortitude that is frankly astonishing for someone of her age. And nowhere was this more evident, more powerfully demonstrated than in her monumental match against Laura Siegemund, a player who is absolutely notorious, infamous even for her relentless psychological warfare on the court. Siegemund is not merely a tennis player. She is at her core a chess player operating in a tennis player's body. Her game is not just about hitting forehands and backhands. It is about manipulation, disruption, and an almost clinical desire to break her opponent's will. She stretches time rules to their absolute breaking point. She constantly engages officials in theatrical, drawn-out disputes. She deliberately disrupts the rhythm of her opponents with agonizingly slow play and bizarre mannerisms. And she tries with every fiber of her being to crawl inside the head of whoever is standing on the other side of the net to plant seeds of doubt to sow frustration. It is a tactic that has successfully broken countless players before leaving even seasoned veterans bewildered and defeated not just by her game but by her psychological assault. Against Jeļena, however, it broke nothing, absolutely nothing. From the very first game, from the moment the ball was struck, Siegemund went to work attempting to transform the match into a brutal, mind-bending psychological battleground. She pushed every boundary imaginable, tested every single rule in the book, and did absolutely everything in her power to throw Jeļena off her carefully cultivated rhythm. Early on, as the match began to unfold, there were fleeting moments where it truly seemed like Siegemund's insidious tactics might be having some subtle creeping effect that the relentless pressure might be getting to the young Filipina. The crowd watched, transfixed, wondering if Jeļena would succumb like so many before her. But then something truly remarkable happened. Jeļena, with a composure that belied her years, simply reset. She didn't argue. She didn't complain. She didn't throw her racket or stare daggers at the umpire. She did not allow the frustration to contort her face or betray itself in her body language. Instead, with a quiet dignity and an almost meditative focus, she walked back to the baseline, took a deep, deliberate breath that seemed to calm the very air around her and focused entirely singularly on the pure, unadulterated act of playing tennis. When Siegemund, with a sly, predatory grin, returned to the court attempting to press her perceived mental advantage, she found not a cracking opponent, but someone who was utterly, completely unshakable. Eala won that match with a calmness, a clarity, and a quiet confidence that was genuinely breathtaking to behold. It wasn't just a victory. It was a powerful statement, and it sent a resounding message reverberating through the entire WTA world. This young woman, this Alex Eala, cannot be rattled. She possesses an inner core of steel that few players, regardless of age or experience, can match. That mental superiority, that unshakable foundation of composure, is the bedrock upon which everything else in her game is built. It is the silent, often invisible, yet ultimately decisive factor. And it is precisely the reason why the head-to-head record between these two players, Jeļena Ostapenko and Alex Eala, looks the way it does. Because when you put someone as demonstrably, heartbreakingly mentally fragile as Ostapenko, someone whose emotional state is transparent for all to see against someone as mentally fortified, as utterly resolute as Eala, the results tend to tell a very consistent, very powerful story. And that story, that compelling narrative of mental dominance, began at the Miami Open last season in what turned out to be one of the most stunning, most unexpected upsets of the entire tournament. At that time, the ranking gap between these two players was enormous. A chasm separating an established veteran from an ascending talent. Ostapenko was the established top player, a Grand Slam champion, riding a wave of good form, playing with that familiar, almost intimidating confidence. And on paper, for any seasoned analyst, this should have been nothing short of a routine win for the Latvian, a comfortable passage to the next round. But Alex Eala, bless her heart, had absolutely no interest in following that neatly scripted narrative. In a match that had the entire crowd completely captivated, drawn into its escalating drama, Eala battled through one of the most dramatic, most nail-biting first sets you will ever witness in professional tennis. She found herself 4 points down, staring directly at the very real, very imminent possibility of dropping the set, of ceding the early psychological advantage. A lesser player, a player without that innate mental steel, without that core of self-belief, would have crumbled at that point, folded under the immense pressure, allowed the set to slip away. But Eala refused to fold. She fought back from that deficit with a ferocious yet composed determination, stayed perfectly centered under enormous, almost unbearable pressure, and against all odds, she took the first set in a tiebreak, winning it 7-6, clinching it with a coolness that defied logic. The roar from the crowd was deafening, a tribute to her remarkable resilience. The second set, incredibly, was equally dramatic. A roller coaster of emotions and momentum swings. Eala, buoyed by her first set triumph, took control early and built a commanding 4-point lead, looking like she was finally going to run away with it to secure a relatively comfortable victory. But Ostapenko, wounded but not yet defeated, fought back with all the aggression and raw emotion she could muster. She clawed her way level, refusing to accept defeat, unleashing her powerful ground strokes with renewed intensity. And here, in those critical tension-filled moments, is where the mental difference between these two extraordinary players became absolutely decisive, irrevocably clear. Because while Ostapenko was scrapping and clawing, trying to force her way back into the match through sheer aggression and unbridled emotion, her face a mask of furious determination, Eala remained calm. She was composed. She was focused. Her gaze unwavering, her body language radiating in inner peace. And she found a way through once again, digging deep, accessing that wellspring of mental fortitude. She took the second set, another agonizing tiebreak, 7-6, sealing a victory that sent shock waves across the entire WTA world. A victory that announced her arrival with authority. It was the first time Eala had defeated a player of Ostapenko's standing, a Grand Slam champion, and the manner in which she did it was nothing less than extraordinary. A masterclass in mental toughness. Ostapenko, still reeling from the shock, must have told herself it was a one-off. She must have clung to the desperate hope that it was an anomaly, an unfortunate confluence of circumstances. She must have convinced herself that on that particular day, perhaps the conditions just did not favor her, that the result was an aberration, a statistical blip. She surely reasoned that the next time they met, she would be ready. She would have the answers. She would finally solve the puzzle of Alex Eala. That second chance, that opportunity for redemption came not long after at the Eastbourne Open in 2025. And Ostapenko came into that match hungry, visibly prepared, a fire burning in her eyes, determined to rewrite the narrative. She took the first set, and for just a brief tantalizing moment, it genuinely looked like she had finally figured Eala out, like she had solved the puzzle that had tormented her in Miami, like she had successfully put that nightmare firmly behind her. The fans, the commentators, even Eala herself might have wondered if this was the day Ostapenko would finally assert her dominance. But she had not. Not even close. Eala, displaying that characteristic resilience, that astonishing mental fortitude, came back systematically dismantling Ostapenko's game, winning the next 2 sets in a row and closing out the match in the most decisive, most psychologically crushing fashion possible. 2 meetings, 2 defeats for Ostapenko. The rematch, far from offering redemption, had only served to make things exponentially worse for the Latvian because now there was absolutely no excuse left to cling to. No ranking gap to point to, no convenient surface to blame, no convenient aberration to hide behind. The undeniable, inescapable truth had emerged. Alex Eala simply had her number, and every single person watching, every fan, every coach, every analyst knew it with absolute certainty. The psychological advantage was no longer theoretical. It was established, cemented, a heavy weight on Ostapenko's shoulders. So, here we are. The Linz opened. Second round, and these 2 women, intertwined by a burgeoning rivalry, are set to meet once again. The tension is palpable, almost suffocating. Ostapenko comes into this fateful encounter, carrying the immense crushing weight of 2 consecutive psychologically damaging defeats against this specific opponent. She carries a mental game that is not just fragile, but has been publicly exposed, dissected, and analyzed on multiple painful occasions. And she carries the burden of a season that from start to finish has been nothing short of a nightmare, a torturous descent into inconsistency and self-doubt. Her confidence, usually a key weapon, is shattered. Her temperament, already volatile, seems on the verge of explosion. Eala, on the other hand, strides onto the court with momentum, with undeniable form, and perhaps most crucially, with a profound psychological edge that only comes from having already defeated someone twice, from having proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that you hold their number. She comes with the kind of mental clarity, the unshakable inner peace that makes her not just a promising talent, but one of the most exciting, most dangerous young players in the world right now. She knows she belongs. She knows she can win. She knows she can handle the pressure. And she knows deep down that Ostapenko knows it too. The record, the cold hard numbers says Eala wins. The current form, the trajectory of both players says Eala wins. But more than statistics, more than mere recent performance, the mental battle, the true war of wills has already been decided long before either of them steps onto the sacred ground of the court. It was decided in Miami, reaffirmed in Eastbourne, and it will echo through every rally, every crucial point, every tiebreak at the Linz Open. Ostapenko is panicking. You can feel it. You can almost taste her anxiety. And honestly, given everything we have seen, given the undeniable evidence of her past struggles and Eala's remarkable resilience, who in their right mind could possibly blame her? Alex Eala is coming. A force of calm determination and history, that relentless arbiter of fate is very much undeniably on her side. This isn't just a tennis match. This is a reckoning, a psychological showdown that will define the trajectory of both careers.